welcome to the second and final day of RETCON Multifamily. We have an amazing lineup of speakers to learn from today, along with equally notable attendees to network with. If you didn't say hi to that special person yesterday, the time is now. To kick us off today, I'm excited to introduce Scott Evans. Scott is the Chief Digital Officer of Related Companies, which built Hudson Yards, the largest private real estate development in the history of the United States. Scott is responsible for the development and implementation of the digital technology strategy for Hudson Yards, which officially opened in March of 2019. He has over 25 years of experience building and leading global digital businesses, leveraging technology to evolve and accelerate growth. There's no one better to kick off the day. Please welcome Scott with some virtual claps.
Good afternoon. My name is Scott Evans. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at Hudson Yards. And I'd like to thank everybody for the opportunity to speak at the Real Estate Technology Conference. Today, I want to take you on a little bit of a journey. It's about how do we think about Hudson Yards? How do we think about the digital vision of Hudson Yards? And the development of digital products that allow us to really engage the customer in a data-led environment. And more recently, how we've adapted to change and how we're thinking about the future. First off, though, I think it's important to give you a little perspective on Hudson Yards. And some of you may not have been there. We opened in March of 2019. And it's really about a place where you can live, work, and play in the heart of New York City. So I want to play this quick video to give you a sense and feel of Hudson Yards and why it was so important for us to understand how to bring it to life through technology. So here's the video.
The idea for Hudson Yards actually originated 20 years ago.
It's a piece of land that never existed before.
We're creating public space in a place that was a rail yard.
This is the last big development area. It's kind of amazing to be a part of it.
The vastness is almost without precedent when you look around the world.
Hudson Yards is like the new heart in the very old city.
We respond to where we live and work, and therefore we make the cities and then they make us.
The project, in a way, is a big invitation.
It's been an incredibly exciting morning. We'll see you, I guess, in 2 years when the vessel is done and we'll all walk together.
Stephen, it's been 233 days since groundbreaking.
It seems like, it's 233 years.
Being a native New Yorker, I think that anything that is new and different in New York is something that we should celebrate.
One of the reasons we're excited to be part of Hudson Yard is because of how it's transforming the neighborhood in so many different ways.
We're incredibly excited about seeing our neighborhood evolve, to now see a tremendous number of new collaborators come into our community is very exciting for us.
I feel like everyone's going to want to just see it because it's such a spectacle of retail.
I've always wanted to open on the East Coast, and Hudson Yards just makes the most sense because of the density, the vision, the grandeur of the whole development.
And now all of a sudden you're going to have, every kind of restaurant I could think of in 2 city blocks.
It's that mix and that coming together that creates something bigger than the individuals themselves. And I think that's the promise of this whole new neighborhood in New York.
I know it. I feel it. I know exactly what this is going to be. Hudson Yards is going to be the new center of the city.
Part of the challenges of building a technology in a real estate environment is about pace. If you look at the bottom here, we received the award for Hudson Yards in 2008. We didn't open until 2019. In that time frame, huge amount of innovation occurred. Whether it's Uber, whether it's WeWorks, you name it. So the challenge is the customer's expectations are moving a lot faster than the design that is happening for a new development like Hudson Yards. Narrowing it down a little bit, when you think of everything on the top, these are all customer-facing experiences and apps. Again, moving rather rapidly. And at the bottom is your traditional partners you have in a real estate environment, whether it's elevators, BMS, security, the environment, and or property management. And the challenge there is how quickly do they move? Because your customer expectations are moving a lot faster. And the real question is, will your partners move and innovate just as quickly? Our approach was, let's understand what really the customers are looking for, what user experiences are needed across all our asset classes. So what we did is we built a digital master plan. That includes residential, retail, commercial, public space, experiences, and we broke that out. And this is probably a lower number that we really came up with, but like it was at least 106 different user experiences that we organized. And then we looked at what systems did that touch in a traditional real estate environment. And there's over 40 plus systems. That number's probably dramatically increased since we launched Hudson Yards. And what it brought to us was we needed to control an efficient mechanism to bring experiences to life. So we thought about it as the related technology platform. And there's certain components of that platform that are critical. Connectivity, right, is like oxygen, cellular Wi-Fi, recognition, so you can deliver content at an appropriate time to an individual when timing is perfect for them to engage at Hudson Yards. Location, wayfinding, whether it's transactions and payments and experiences or buying tickets or sensing, what kind of beacons do we put? And ultimately, big data. So the related technology platform for us was a way for us to do integrations in an efficient manner and also replace them as technology evolved. On this slide, we thought about it from like 3 different sectors. One is all the user-facing components that we would build, right? Number 2 is the connectors, which is all about connectivity, right? Which is, again, across all of Hudson Yards in public spaces and in our residential locations, as well as core technology. And core technology is important because a CMS is important. We need one centralized approach, one CMS that we can deploy content across all these user experiences. CRM, because our mission really was one 360 view of a customer. When they enter Hudson Yards, whether they're signing on for Wi-Fi or whether going to our website, we wanted to make sure we understand what is that profile of that individual and how can we help them at Hudson Yards. And ultimately, the related platform, which again is just short form for an amazing architecture that we put in place. That's a open sourced environment that allows us to pilot quickly, innovate quickly, and then learn quickly about what is the right experience for us to provide to our user base. Here's a couple of examples of the products that we launched with. Wi-Fi, right? Amazingly important. In our first year, we had over a 10% sign-up rate on our Wi-Fi at Hudson Yards. And then how do people learn about Hudson Yards? How do we get individuals to drive to Hudson Yards and engage at Hudson Yards? Well, we've built a responsive website. I don't think there's any surprise there, but actually had some great adoption. We had over 18 million page views and 8.4 million sessions just in our first 9 months of opening. Digital signage. Now, digital signage is an interesting opportunity for us. It's a way of building kiosks that are touch capacitive as needed, LEDs and LCDs. And it's a way of us getting our message out about what's happening at Hudson Yards. And ironically, again, pre-COVID, a lot of engagement that occurred from a touch perspective. Because you can buy your tickets for the vessel, tickets for the Edge, you can make a reservation, all through our digital signage network. We had over 1.3 million sessions in our first 9 months at Hudson Yards. We also knew that we had to kind of provide an amazing experience for our residential customers. So we built what we call Related Connect. It's an app that provides services, experiences, opens up your lock of your door. We built it and we deployed it across the entire Related portfolio. It's in over 42 buildings and has over 4,000 active users. And last but not least, again, this is just a selection, building entry. And I'm just going to show you a quick overview of building entry. We decided that the HID card wasn't acceptable. So we actually have, you can see here with the HID card, we put in Morpho. And Morpho enables an individual to come in, just use their hand, and then it does directed dispatch to the elevator that they're assigned to. Another important element that we thought through was how do we ensure that we have a 360 view of our customer? And this goes back to the agile architecture that we put in place. On the top, you have all your data sources. Again, this could be not just this subset, but multiple use groups that we can add in based upon new partners that we find. That's integrated into our related platform. We have a data store structure that's in place. And ultimately, there's a profiling engine that unites all this information across one profile for an individual. And then that's usable and or scalable across all of our business units, which we're using Salesforce. And we're deploying them across the orgs, whether it's city centers, rentals, for sale, office, or retail. Again, a critical part of what we're doing, and also a very strategic part of what we're doing. But there's been a lot of change occurring. There's a lot of innovation that we're on the process of doing that, because of COVID, was now the time to launch it. One of them was working with Otis on ExpressPass. In ExpressPass, the idea was, how do I get up, right, go on an elevator, and not touch a button or a public panel, and I can just run it from my phone. So here's a good example of like me coming up this morning. I'm on the Sky Lobby. It calls my elevator to 82. I get on, G1's arrived, off I go. I don't touch anything. I just use my phone. It just works with beacons. And I think it's been a good solution from a touchless perspective. We've got some new innovation coming down the line as far as an experience we're partnering with Verizon on called Rhapsody. This is in pilot mode. And what it is, it's an amazing musical experience as you traverse the vessel. And I think this will be something we'll talk more about in the future. People counter became more and more important when it came to capacity. So we have a new people counting solution, which gives us understanding of how many people are on campus, whether we're at any threshold, and also gives us great reporting so we can learn more about how people are engaging at Hudson Yards. And that's on the plaza as well as in our retail shops. And then our next phase, which is looking at, and we're assessing whether a commercial app and or a loyalty program makes sense to deploy. Again, our theory of the case is more and more people want experiences. They want simplicity. They want to be able to enter the building seamlessly. They want to be able to order food. They want a loyalty program that recognizes them. So this is the next phase of development that we're going to put into play. There's a lot of lessons learned that I want to make sure that we take away from today. One, budget early. Right? When you're going through the development process and you're thinking about your digital master plan, you want to make sure that there's a committed budget that's embedded in a development budget for that development. It may be common sense, but fundamentally, I think that's important to get in there early. Doesn't need to be perfect, but I think it'll be helpful in the future. Use an open platform, right? Part of the innovation and the future proofing of your experiences is all about like who do you choose from a development partner standpoint, as well as how your architecture can evolve quickly as technology evolves. It took about 50 partners to bring Hudson Yards to life, and a tremendous amount of management. That's why a PMO is so important, to make sure that you're working together in a very cohesive fashion. One very important component is infrastructure planning. You can have a digital master plan. You can have a multitude of amazing concepts. But if there is not an infrastructure plan being designed in early, it will be tough to bring out to life. We have learned that multiple times. And as we think about our future developments and how we're scaling, this is a critical learning that we're now applying. And ultimately, data protection and privacy, right, constantly evolving, but that is a critical brand component to make sure that you're protecting the data and your customers' data, and you have to be fully compliant. So looking forward, there are a lot of changes happening right now. I think of it as an opportunity to innovate, an opportunity to create value. A couple areas where I think that is happening. what's happening with COVID and health services and making sure every single day we're going through our proper questionnaire is going to create, I think, an opportunity to link that with access control, building entry, and ultimately new transactions that are going to happen across the real estate campus. That's one area that we're watching closely. Number two, the retail platform. Lots of changes in retail. We've seen Amazon disrupting. Well, I think this is a unique opportunity to put in new solutions where your retail partners' products can be displayed in more unique ways across an entire ecosystem or digital ecosystem at a real estate environment. At Hudson Yards, we do that across all of our digital screens, and I think we're just at the cusp of learning more about what our retailers are looking for us, and I think that partnership model will rapidly evolve. A 360 view of a customer, I think that becomes more and more important. Understanding how to engage that customer, how to segment it. We do a tremendous amount of work with our marketing team, make sure that our CRM can have specific journeys, have segmentation, understand what affinity groups they're in, and constantly understand where they are taking us. Proptech. There's a lot of work going on in Proptech. This is where we keep an eye on across specific areas to understand where innovation is occurring. And that then helps us to do pilots, as well as define who our proper market partners should be for us to actually bring them into our ecosystem and innovate. And lastly, but not an important component, which is like look outside your market vertical. We look outside of real estate. We look at where the best in class is occurring. We look at what's happening in certain areas because I think that tells us what the customer is going to expect, how we need to react, and most importantly, given the architecture that we have in place, we can then take those experiences, bring them into Hudson Yards, and understand the impact for our customers, and then determine if it's a success or not. The last piece that we put in place is just scalability. Everything we've done at Hudson Yards, we think about how do we scale it out to our new developments, whether it's at Rosemary Square, Grand Avenue, Santa Clara, locations at Brent Cross. We are constantly ensuring that everything we have built at Hudson Yards can naturally scale. That brings value to our organization as well. So those are my lessons learned. And those are my forward-looking concepts and ideas. And hopefully this was helpful. And I appreciate your time. And hopefully everybody has a wonderful day. Thank you for your time.
Wow, Scott, that was awesome. Thanks for being a part of the RETCON community. Note that you'll be able to see Scott later and ask him questions during the special event at 5 p.m. ET, which is a virtual tour of Hudson Yards. Our next speaker, Ben Steward, is a leader at G5, the top marketing technology company focused specifically on multifamily. Ben is G5's VP of Revenue, which means he knows how a wide range of multifamily owners are approaching their marketing strategies. Prior to joining G5 in 2015, Ben founded multiple companies, including one in New Zealand. Ben, the virtual stage is yours.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thanks for joining me. Before we dive into today's topic, I want to thank RETCON. It's pretty clear that technology is driving some disruption in our space, and no more clear than today with our current backdrop given COVID. I think that the pace of technology adoption is evolving rapidly and very, very timely for this conference. So thank you, RETCON. We appreciate holding down the fort when it comes to marketing technology. And very excited about today's topic. We're going to dive into identifying blind spots with intelligent marketing. So quick introduction, I'm Ben. I'm the VP of Revenue here at a company called G5. We've been in the marketing technology space in multifamily for pushing 13 years now. And pretty excited to walk through today's topic with you. And before I do, I want to start with a story. I think a few of us probably have Zoom fatigue. And I want to kick us off with a funny story. I'm used to a live audience and I'm used to the energy. So forgive me if I ask you to put your hand up. That's something I'm just used to given live conferences, and I'm still adjusting to the virtual world. Don't worry, I can't see you. But I do get a kick out of the idea of people sitting at home with their hand in the air. So quick show of hands for me. Who has made the dreadful mistake of sharing their screen by mistake, changing over and going to their emails while they're sharing their screen with an audience? I've personally done this. I was talking with my team recently, and I was so excited to tell them a topic that I flipped over to my Slack. I started pinging with the leader of the team, and I said, hey, is it okay if we share this with them? And before I sent the Slack, they said to me, absolutely, it's okay. And I was like, how did that happen? And it dawned on me that I was sharing my screen, and the whole team was giggling away as I was sending my Slack. And I tell that story because it's funny. I had a similar experience with my CEO just recently, where we were on a Zoom call, and we were talking about friction in the apartment buying experience or the apartment shopping experience. And while we were having this really good in-depth conversation, our CEO was sharing his screen, and all of a sudden he flipped tabs and he was shopping for a Tesla. And he went through 2 or 3 stages, and everyone was kind of quiet. And eventually I said, Dan, go to the Model X. And he smiled and said, Ben, 3 clicks and I'm entering my credit card details. Now, granted, he wasn't actually shopping for a Tesla, but he was showing us how seamless the experience was. Choose your exterior, choose your interior, enter your credit card details. And that's what our consumers, our renters today have become accustomed to. And it was a really valuable exercise for us. You will see the same thing on Uber Eats. It's incredibly user-friendly and incredibly easy to press a button, and within 15, 20 minutes, you have food at your doorstep. And these same consumers, these same renters are the ones shopping for apartments. And it's very, very clear that renter expectations have changed. They have been completely spoiled rotten by Uber, by Amazon, by Tesla, and those shopping experiences. And it's very clear also that we're in the age of the hyper-informed customer. And they're expecting fast, frictionless, personalized experiences that are instant, that are always on. And I wonder if anyone on the call has been through the apartment shopping experience recently. It's a little bit friction-filled. To get to this step was 7 or 8 clicks. To get through the application was another 16 steps. And if you think about this and distill this, these same consumers that are used to these beautiful experiences on other brands are the same consumers trying to rent apartments. And I think we will all agree that there's plenty of friction in this journey. So the question is why? Like, this experience is ripe for disruption, but what's holding us back? I think the answer is that data is completely disparate and siloed. If you think about this, we've got revenue management systems, property management systems, CRMs and lead management systems, marketing data that we need to aggregate across Google, Bing, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. We've got phone calls, we've got form fills, we've got reputation. And every single one of these lives in a disparate data silo. And data is really quickly becoming our currency. And data is how we're going to be able to bring these journeys and these stories together. So again, I think we'd all agree that marketing matters more than ever. Given our COVID backdrop, buyer behavior has changed, consumers' expectations have changed, and marketing really is this conduit between your company and the renter. And the platform that you choose for your marketing, the data that you're aggregating behind your marketing, is really this conduit between your company and everything that you do with your company, your property management software, your operations, your sales, and the most important part, which is the customer, the renter. All right, so let's shift gears into blind spots. What blind spots? Happy you asked. We're going to dive into that. So we've got 3 main topics today that we want to unpack a little bit. We'll get a little bit technical. We'll have a little bit of fun. We'll go deep. We'll come back up. The one we're going to start with is that data just simply right now is largely incorrect. Number 2, data is missing and siloed. Number 3, renter behavior is changing rapidly. Let's jump into number 1. Okay, I can't tell you how many customers I've worked with, property management companies, where we've really gone deep into performance and we've unpacked the CRM data that's living there today. And this is one that always gets me. Source, drive-by. Even better, source, balloons. Better than that again, source, apts.com, apartments.com, apt.co. That leasing agent was having a busy day. apt.co was borderline lazy. And while we've got all this information, it's so difficult to aggregate this information when we're relying on human data entry. And similarly, in the tech world, if you look at what is a pretty complex topic called attribution, historically, we've looked at this overly simplistic attribution model where a disproportionate amount of traffic is classified as direct. Here's the problem with that. There's no one that I know of that started their apartment shopping experience, went to the search engine and said, www.theray.com. It just doesn't happen that way. And so direct as a big source of traffic is actually misleading. And so that leads us into our first kind of deep topic around attribution. Attribution's a complex one. So stay with me here a little bit. We'll go deep, we'll go technical, and we'll come back up for air. Very, very different attribution models. And the industry at large today uses what we call a last touch attribution model. With last touch, it's very, very limited with what it can tell you. It will tell you that last referring source before the interaction happens. The interaction being the phone call or the form fill, that action that you really want to capture. The problem with the last touch attribution model is that it will never give credit to how that customer first found you. So think about display network advertising. Typically, it's a brand awareness campaign. You will never see display network advertising show up as a contributing source if you're using a last touch attribution model. Similarly, think about the first touch attribution model and think about remarketing. A first touch attribution model will tell you how someone very first found you, but it will never give credit to a remarketing campaign. And so all of a sudden, when you really think about this and really distill this, we're using overly simplistic methods today. Now, you've started to see things like linear multi-touch, time decay multi-touch. Each of those have their pitfalls as well. So let's go a little bit deeper here. Traditional multi-touch attribution is overly simplistic. It's a step advanced from first touch or last touch. But if you look at a simplistic multi-touch attribution model, for example, a linear multi-touch attribution model, it will give equal credit to every touch point along the way. Well, that's one way of doing it. A better way of doing it is what we call a probabilistic multi-touch attribution model. So stay with me here because this gets a little bit complex. With probabilistic multi-touch attribution models, one of which actually known as a Markov attribution model, you can actually start completely flipping how you look at attribution. And you can actually start looking at contribution and which paths played a contributing role to the overall volume of leases or leads. And therefore, if you removed one of those contributing roles, what would the overall impact be? That starts getting complex. But when you start looking at the data in a very, very different way, you start getting a very, very different story. As an example, when we deployed our probabilistic multi-touch attribution models, we started seeing, whereas historically you'd attribute 1 lead to PPC for the month, 2 leads to PPC for the month, 10 leads to PPC for the month, what we found was that PPC was actually contributing to over 25% of the overall leads generated, but it was somewhere along that journey. And if you measured the removal effect of PPC to the overall volume of leads generated, it had a really material impact. But we've been doing it wrong. We've been saying we spent X in March, we got Y in March, And that's it. Another interesting stat point, 21.9 days from first website observation to interaction. People are browsing. They're doing their shopping online now. And we haven't ever been able to see, when did they visit the website? When did they leave? When did they come back? What did they do? What did they do before conversion? If you look at the CRM data, you'll notice someone physically toured, someone called our property, someone sent a lead. But there is so much rich information about that lead and about that journey pre-interaction that the CRM just doesn't have visibility into. Another really interesting stat, I think we understate the importance of SEO still today. 59% of prospects used organic search to relocate a property website after their first visit. Think about that. People are shopping, they're doing their diligence online, they're then using brand recall to do a branded search term on which they're expecting you to show up organically. We never knew that before. We never knew the secondary and tertiary journeys. Very, very interesting, the light that complex attribution models are able to shine on this customer journey now. So let's shift gears a tiny bit. Another really important thing to consider here is what we consider a lead or an interaction. What we've been able to do now with technologies, advanced technologies like machine learning, is actually start listening to phone calls. So leveraging machine learning, we're able to listen to, transcribe, tokenize phone calls, and actually determine with an incredible degree of accuracy who actually has high intent to rent. Is that local campaign actually generating qualified leads? Or is it actually the nationwide campaign that's generating qualified leads? Historically, we've looked at this campaign received this many phone calls, or this campaign received this many form fills. And when you actually put a whole new layer of data on top of that, which is which campaigns were driving qualified marketing leads, it completely flips the story upside down. And the other thing it does is completely removes the guesswork. Should I do branded? Should I not do branded? Should I do Facebook? Should I not do Facebook? Should I do Google bid adjusted to mobile? Should I not? With this insight, you're able to see exactly where your qualified leads are coming from. And you can actually automate the output of that. Pretty clever stuff. Okay, so part of our promise here throughout the presentation is to try and distill this into kind of meaningful actions for you. This topic is complex. Marketing technology is getting incredibly sophisticated. And so we want to just distill every topic down into a couple of nice takeaways for you. Action item number 1 for consideration. Measure contribution. Don't get led astray by overly simplistic attribution models. Where you put your next marketing dollar is how you drive spend efficiency. Be sophisticated and demand sophisticated from your vendors. The second action item, leverage machine computing power. Machines now can process data at just exponential rates, by far and away more so than humans can process data. And when you think about the decisions being made and the spend being made on apartments today through advertising specifically, you have to be leveraging machine learning technology to compute probabilistic multi-touch attribution models at a rate that humans couldn't possibly. And the results that we're starting to see come out of this technology are surprising even me, and I've been in the space for a while now. Okay, so the third action item, demand a new layer of data. Demand an understanding of, okay, that's great, showing me how many phone calls this campaign generated, but how many of those were qualified? Demand that data from your marketing provider because they're making optimizations based on that data. And so it is a very fair request for you to say, I don't want to optimize to residents. I don't want to optimize to landscapers who are asking for my business. I really want to optimize to people with high intent to rent because that's how I'm going to spend my marketing dollar efficiently. Whew, okay. That was blind spot number 1. That was a lot. Let's take a breath before we go into blind spot number 2. So blind spot number 2 is that data is missing and siloed. And we touched on this at the top of the presentation. I don't think it will be a surprise to anyone. it is very, very difficult to operationalize data across so many different technologies. And as more and more technologies come to light and we adopt more and more technologies, finding a marketing provider that's able to operationalize across those different platforms is incredibly important. Yet you still want best in class. And so providing a best in class technology stack means being Switzerland. You have to play nicely with everyone. You have to be able to have your conduit to your renter be a best in class marketing provider. Yet it needs to integrate seamlessly with multiple different CRMs, with multiple different property management systems, with every revenue management system. You need to pull in reputation management data. You need to be able to measure the impact of your social campaigns. And so you need to start demanding that your marketing provider is operationalizing the data. Technology in this space is getting very advanced very quickly. CDP is a term that you'll hear pretty frequently from here. And it's called the Customer Data Platform. And customer data platforms allow you to marry unique identifiers across all of these disparate data silos and actually start really surfacing sophisticated user journeys. So what we know about the user journey is that it's on average 20 digital touch points to conversion. 20 different digital touch points to conversion. When you think about all of those touch points, that is pretty remarkable. And it's pretty complex to start matching those journeys together to know where to put your next marketing dollar. And again, if you think about the rich data we're able to capture on the renter before interaction, think about this. We're able to capture the search query. We're able to know, is that their first time to the website or is it their second or third time to the website? We're able to know user behavior. How did they navigate the website? What was their click path? Where did they spend the most time? Were they interested in the 2-bedroom unit with the view amenity that was pulling through? Were they interested in the specials? We've captured all of this rich information on the renter before they even pick up the phone to call, which is the one touch point that shows up in your CRM. So think about just the importance of marketing technology today. Shifting gears a tiny bit, I think it's important also to note the way we've been looking at timelines is flawed. We touched on this a little bit again at the start of the presentation, but think about this. From first website observation to conversion, we know is about 21, 22 days on average. We see that go up to 60 days. We see it come down to like same day decision making. But on average, your advertising spend in April has an influence in May. It has an influence in June. And so the overly simplistic model that we've used to look at how we're saying we spent X in May and we got Y in May needs to be revisited. So reputation management, I can't tell you how many customers I've had good conversations with in this space. Reputation management's vital. Given COVID again, physical shopping has slowed down. And so people are relying more and more and more on the reputation of that property. We've had instances where we're driving a huge volume of what we consider to be marketing qualified leads to properties. And yet we've had this disconnect with overall conversions. And the more and more we've probed, the more and more we've been able to distill this down into kind of these contributing factors, one of which being reputation. If you have a 1-star review today, no matter how good your advertising efforts can be, you're going to lose visitors. People are going to read that review and decide maybe that's not the apartment for me, and they're going to continue their shopping journey. All right, again, that was a fair amount. So let me distill this into a few action items. Consider the rich information that we can gather on users pre-interaction. Think about your marketing providers today and whether or not they're able to capture that information. Consider your measurement cadence as well. Consider the lag effect of your January spend on February conversions. Consider also not waiting until you have trending 60-day exposure before you deploy your advertising spend. And I think the third one is advertise what's really for rent. when you can connect disparate data silos, you can actually connect your floor plan availability to the ad text that shows in the Google search engine. Think about that. If you have no 2-bedroom availability, you have the ability to automatically turn off 2-bedroom floor plan type campaigns in AdWords. That starts getting you spend efficient. That's our third action item on blind spot number 2. We're throwing a lot at you today. So we're going to go into quite a fun topic. Renter behavior is changing rapidly. No more rapidly than right now. We're in Oregon. G5 is headquartered in Bend, and Oregon just went into another 2-week lockdown. And we're starting to see these really crazy shifts and rapid shifts in consumer behavior. People are adapting to working from home. Searches for webcams up 300%. Searches for lap desks up 100%. Bread machines. I don't think I could think of anything better than sitting at home while smelling fresh bread baking in the kitchen. We are watching this really rapid shift. And renters are curious. Searches for virtual are up 25%. Mobile searches for the term best have grown over 80%. Best apartments for rent in San Diego. Renters are also demanding. 74% of users agree that they look for the most relevant information regardless of the company providing that information. This is such a rapid shift. This will be no surprise. Renters are also impatient. The latest study that I saw said that you have 6 seconds to capture an apartment renter on your website before they lose interest. 6 seconds. That's shorter than a goldfish. Okay, some more interesting stats here. 50% of consumers aged 18 to 34 expect same-day delivery. We've seen a 150% increase in travel searches for today and tonight, and a 3 times increase in open now searches. Our consumers are being spoiled by brilliant shopping experiences, and they're expecting instant gratification. And we need to tailor our approach to that as aggressively as we possibly can. Blind spot number 3, this is an interesting one. So we did a study with Google in about 2018, I believe it was. And we saw some really interesting shifts. At that time, we saw 35% of people physically touring one apartment building before making their decision. 67% of people physically touring 3 apartments before making their buying decision. Think about how much that behavior has shifted this year. Your online representation of your asset is your representation of your asset. Physical touring is a thing of the past. People are expecting to be able to view a virtual tour, to be able to really sophisticatedly navigate that website and gather all of the rich information that they're looking for their buying experience. We've seen similar trends in the automotive industry. Buyers used to shop 5 dealerships 10 years ago. They're shopping less than 2 dealerships today. And today, 2020 today, my guess is that most of that shopping is done online. We have to keep pace with these shifts. One platform that we've been measuring and monitoring very closely is YouTube. People are consuming more and more online media, and YouTube and videos are right at the top of that. And some interesting stats that we've seen: an 8% higher search conversion volume after viewing an ad on YouTube, a 3% higher search conversion rate after viewing an ad on YouTube, and a 4% lower search CPA after viewing an ad on YouTube. And so while we're watching this like direct lead generation through YouTube still isn't quite there in terms of metrics that we would recommend to our customers, we're watching these intangibles shift. And obviously Google and YouTube are tied at the hip. And so we're starting to see some of these kind of inferential statistics start kind of changing our perspective on the YouTube platform. Okay, again, we've thrown a lot at you. So let's just distill this into a couple of really tangible takeaways. Measure demand. Your marketing demand, your pre-interaction demand, is your leading indicator of property performance. Don't just look at the CRM. Look at your overall funnel. If you can get a picture of demand and you can reasonably infer that the user journeys that are resulting in leases, then you can reasonably infer how big your demand funnel is. Connect the dots. It's remarkable knowing how much rich information we have pre-interaction. The third one, CDPs, automation, probabilistic multi-touch attribution, these things can sound daunting. They don't have to be. Find the right marketing partner that can represent you in all of these things, that have taken time to innovate in this space, and that have taken time to really operationalize data in this space, because they're the ones that are going to be driving rapid innovation, that are going to be able to keep pace with the shifting consumer needs. Whew. Okay, that was a lot. But I want to circle back to this one comment. The apartment shopping experience is ripe for disruption. And the marketing provider, the marketing technology provider that you shop for today needs to be able to keep pace with that disruption, if not lead that disruption. I think that's hard to argue with. And it's time to make marketing your operational advantage. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Thank you, RETCON, for the amazing conference. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you, Ben. That was stupendous. Feel free to connect with Ben on the platform if you want to talk marketing tech. Our next and final general session speaker is Andre Jordan Sanchez, COO of the self-touring and smart home platform Rently. Rently is based out of Los Angeles and is used by over 3,000 operators nationwide. Prior to joining Rently in 2015, Andre did sales at Apple and was a cancer researcher in the biotech industry. Please welcome Andre to the virtual stage to show you the future of technology-enabled tours and smart homes.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, and thanks RETCON for having me and for having Rently present at this year's first RETCON. Really excited to be a part of it. Part of this conference I want to share with everyone is sort of best practices with something that's really hot, especially in the multifamily world, which is self-guided tours. I know it's a very hot topic in the industry right now. And so I thought one thing that Rently could help contribute to everyone attending RETCON is a playbook for self-guided tour success. There's a lot of people that are deploying self-guided tours, so we really wanted to help have a TED Talk style talk about what self-guided touring is, what it isn't, and sort of some of the problems that self-guided tours can help address for multifamily and single-family operators that may be attending the show. So for this particular talk, we've outlined 4 objectives that we want to help achieve at the end of this talk, and hopefully you can walk away from this talk and say, hey, I learned something about self-guided tours. And so, first we're going to define the problem that self-guided tours help solve. And the next step we're going to do is also define self-guided tours, our definition of it, how we approach it, and obviously, again, with so many people talking about it, it's important to really understand what a self-guided tour compromises of. And then also, too, we want to help define the problem and solution set that's specific to your particular company, right? What problem do you want to solve with self-guided tours? Then also, too, given that we've done, Rently has performed so many self-guided tours, about 14 million to date, and we've worked with so many operators on deploying it, we want to share some best practices and help you establish milestones for what determines a successful self-guided tour rollout. So again, I'm Andre Jordan Sanchez. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Rently. Been here for 6 years. Rently, if you haven't heard of us, we work with over 3,000 operators nationwide that use our technology both in the single family and the multifamily space, which we're really excited about. Our platform, since its founding, has conducted about 14 million plus self-guided tours We average anywhere between 150 to 250,000 self-guided tours a month based on seasonality. So again, really happy to be a part of this show. And I wanted to start off by kind of addressing the problem, right? Every product in the marketplace wants to solve a problem. What's the problem that self-guided tours is trying to solve, right? And so obviously now with COVID, a lot of people have talked about, we want to go contactless, but even before COVID, a lot of operators in the multifamily space were already scaling out self-guided tours. And, you know, some fast statistics I like to share is that, you know, every year, on average, we have about 20 million renters that are moving annually. You know, this is on top of home buyers that are moving. It's another 15 to 20 million. So we have a lot of velocity when it comes to renters actually moving. Obviously, that's been impacted by COVID, but obviously, you know, probably in 2021, we're going to see a huge spike from pent-up demand. We also know, according to industry surveys, that 86% of renters want to see a unit in person, right? The NMHC Kingsley study survey done last year actually validated that. And we also know, you know, being that we've provided self-guided tours for so long and we've looked at the data, and we'll actually share some later in the presentation, that about 57% of self-guided tours happen outside of a traditional Monday through Friday 10 to 6 schedule. So there's a lot of opportunity there with self-guided tour technology, which can work beyond those leasing office hours to capture those additional leads or prospects that are potentially visiting your property. And then we also know too from industry surveys that prospects want to tour their way. Shouldn't be a surprise to anyone in this room or attending this virtual show. They want to go through a self-guided tour because it lets them see that property or that vacant unit when it's convenient for them. And so, again, I like to start off by breaking down what a self-guided tour is. And because the nomenclature is used on a broad variety of technologies, you know, I've heard people refer to self-guided tours as, you know, even something manually intensive. We really like to help define what a self-guided tour is. And really there's 4 S's or 4 benchmarks that we like to, that an operator should really ask of the vendor, you know, if it's a self-guided tour. And 4 kind of benchmarks that we ask is, hey, is it self-guided, right? That might seem obvious, but in actuality, a lot of platforms don't end-to-end guide that prospect. That's really what you want to see in a self-guided tour platform is, can that prospect self-register and conduct that tour without a person present at the property? And you would be surprised, a lot of self-guided tour solutions out there actually fail this test, right? So you want to make sure that the platform is completely end-to-end, self-register, self-guided, lets that prospect and empowers that prospect to tour their way. Second to that, and sort of dovetails into the self-guided part, is security, right? If you are going to have prospects self-registering and actually visiting this vacant property, you definitely want to make sure that that tour is secured. You know, you want to make sure that you're getting some form of government ID on file. You also too want to understand how that government ID is vetted. Is it through matching a static selfie, or is it using a system where it's using a live selfie? Is it in correspondence with other credentials that prospect puts on file? So these are really big requirements. You don't want to just hand out access to anyone. Third thing I like to ask is sync, right? And you should be asking this too, is how does this technology sync with your existing software platforms and your existing access technologies, right? You know, if you're scoping out a self-guided tour and it requires this huge investment or retrofit, is that the right solution for all of your properties? Conversely too, what's your tech stack that you have in place? Are you using a CRM to process guest cards? Are you feeding those into a property management system? So these are all requirements for any self-guided tour platform. And then last but not least, scalable, right? We get operators that approach us and they've done something in-house, but they've hit limitations on scaling across portfolio-wide rollouts. Scalable, again, is really important for you. If you're going to pilot self-guided tours, you want to make sure you can roll it out to the rest of your portfolio. So really important metrics that you should ask yourself. And then taking it from a higher level to more granular level, right? What comprises a self-guided tour solution set? Well, there's a hardware and there's a software component. So let's start with the software component, right? Your prospect is visiting this community that has self-guided tours. What does that mean? Well, that means that prospect should be able to check into the property, should be able to see those amenities, and should be able to get community information about that specific property as well. And so you can get an example here of how a prospect can select a unit, see the amenities, and actually instantly tour that property. So typically, email isn't sufficient, especially with some of the more complex properties that we work with. You really want to guide that prospect, and more importantly, without an app required, right? You don't want to force someone to download an app. People get app fatigue. So there's definitely a software component to this self-guided tour technology as well. And then, of course, more importantly, too, is the hardware component, right? How is that prospect going to get access to the various parts of your community? And so, this is where you can use a variety of solutions, right? Things that you want to scope out is things like smart lock boxes versus smart locks versus smart home, right? And there's trade-offs to each, right? Smart lock box, really fast to deploy, no retrofit required, has huge benefits. And then other operators, and again, this depends on the problem you want to solve, which we'll get into, is, hey, we actually want to provide more IoT-based solutions as an amenity to prospects and then hand it off to the resident as well. So making sure that you understand the hardware components and how the self-guided tour technology is going to work with those on site is really key. And also understanding, too, how you would retrofit a property if that is the path you want to go down. Are you going to do smart locks? Are you going to do smart home? Are you going to amenitize it? How are you going to amenitize it? So those are really important asks of your vendor when you're scoping out self-guided tours, right? Making sure you're successful when you're vetting out all the vendors. Now, a really fun thing that I like to kind of talk about is I love data. And anyone who's seen one of my presentations knows I'm such a data geek, so I always love to include a heat map or data point. But one thing that we like to look at is who is self-touring, right? And so one question I would ask of everyone in the audience that's watching this virtually is take a second to think about who you would suspect is the primary persona that is conducting a self-tour, right? And I want you to think about that second, and I want you to look at this graph. You are probably thinking that it's something that younger demographics trend towards too. We actually performed a simple random sample of about 10,000 Rently users. We just plucked 10,000 Rently users and said, what is the age group that is actually doing the self-guided tour? We found, and as you can see on the screen right now, that a majority of the people performing self-guided tours are either 25 to 34, 35 to 44, or 45 to 54. Those are the three largest age groups that are conducting self-guided tours. I would tend to think, as probably most of you did, that it's primarily driven by millennials, 18 to 24-year-olds. But in actuality, it's quite more focused on older demographics because they just want to actually perform that self-guided tour. So that's just a really interesting piece I'd like to share with everyone. Another big question too is when people are performing self-guided tours, right? When are they actually doing it? And what I mean by that is what times, what days. There's always a question of, should I use self-guided tours during office hours? Should I use it after office hours? And this ties into the problem you want to solve, which we'll talk about later. But we just, again, did a simple random sample. We plucked, I think this is 500,000 self-guided tours. And we just said, hey, when is the time frame that people actually perform and conduct a self-guided tour? As you can see here, the military time is on the left, right? You see 8 a.m. to 20, which is 8 p.m. You see that there's a ton of self-guided tours that are happening on Saturday, Sunday, and after hours. So, sometimes people think, oh, self-guided tours, it's only a solution for COVID. But as you can actually see, even before COVID hit, we were seeing so much activity on Saturdays, Sundays. And again, when you're looking at your community leasing office hours, I would compare what you're seeing here to when your leasing office hours are open, right? Usually it's Monday through Friday, maybe you have a half day Saturday. maybe you're closed on Sunday. So this is really interesting, and we found that a lot of users see when self-guided tours happen and actually adjust their office hours too, which is really really neat to see too. So this is something I like to show people to really emphasize the fact that self-guided tours happen a lot when that leasing office is closed. One thing I also want to mention too is, how is a self-guided tour different from a virtual tour, right? And again, this is something we're all learning about self-guided tours in the multifamily space. It's relatively new, but we like to help define and guide people that do ask that question too. So virtual tour is a bit different from self-guided tours. They're a bit complementary as well, right? So virtual tours, you're typically using something like a Zoom, like we're using today, or any sort of FaceTime or anything like that to show a prospect and give them a sense of the community. Whereas a self-guided tour, again, and this is really important, is that this technology allows a prospect to physically visit that property. I don't know if you remember, we had that 86% stat at the beginning of the presentation, where 86% of people want to tour and want to see the property they're going to move into. This is how self-guided tours really differentiate themselves. You can obviously use both, but the takeaway I like to paint for people is, virtual tours allow you to see a community. A self-guided tour allows a prospect to experience a community, which is really important in multifamily too, because again, you want to highlight those amenities. Those are huge distinguishing factors, and really help you paint the best picture for a prospect that wants to close on that property. So we're talking about the playbook, right? So obviously you're going to be vetting out, vendors, and you want to understand, what should you consider when evaluating a self-guided tour vendor, right? These are questions that you should ask of everyone that you're scoping out. I like acronyms. This is an acronym that we put together. You want to take a peek. You want to take a peek at the vendor. And these 4 items help you understand and evaluate your vendors too. So what's the problem you want to solve, right? That's the most important thing you want to start off with is, hey, I want to, as an operator, offload tours for my leasing staff. Maybe you want to, maybe you're having a challenge, right? Hiring for leasing teams on the weekends, right? Maybe you just want to provide contactless touring. These are all things you really want to internalize and understand what problem that you as an operator want to solve. Also, too, you want to evaluate the vendors too. And this is something that you really want to do a great job of asking the tough questions, right? How do you secure the tour? What are you asking for from a prospect? How secure is your internal system? Do you have any certifications? Are you CCPA compliant is a question that we get all the time, right? And so making sure that that prospect data is not resold and that it's secure. And by the way, we're used to this. This is the questions that you should be asking. If you're really evaluating something seriously, a vendor will expect these questions and will happily fill out that vendor form too. Execute. You want to make sure that you understand how a deployment works, how your pilot's going to work, and really how the vendor sets you up for success, right? So do they perform training with you? What is the typical time frame for a deployment? These are the things that you want to establish when you're looking at vendors. And last, but certainly not least, and as someone in operations, I love these things, KPIs, right? And that's not just internal. How does the platform give you KPIs for success, right? Not just at the community level, but at the portfolio level. Can you measure what's happening at a community? Can you measure those tours? Is there an analytics dashboard? If you scale it out, how do I get optics on all of my properties? Is there reporting mechanisms for all of my properties? Can that data be fed into a property management platform? So these are all things you want to consider. And what are some milestones, right? Again, we've done a lot of these. So what do we see when we're shepherding multifamily operators to deployments? What are key milestones that an operator should target when evaluating vendors and rolling out? Well, again, you'll see that there's 2 before even you deploy, right? Again, emphasizing that research, making sure that you do the thorough research that you need to do with your vendors, and even doing heads up, picking a few vendors to go on different communities. is really important too. And getting buy-in from those pilots as well, helping them understand why you're looking at self-guided tour technology. What is the end goal, right? And having pilots in several communities that have a good buy-in is a really good first two steps to the third key step, which is actually deploying it, right? So like a gym membership, you can't just sign up, you have to use it. So that's really key, is how you're going to deploy it. What internal training are your teams going to undergo in order to deploy self-guided tours? What best practices will you establish in-house? But also, two, how will the vendor work with your on-site team to make sure that you're set up for success? These are important questions. Again, measuring those KPIs and making sure that you're measuring the success of self-guided tours. And then lastly, too, scaling it out, right? You want to make sure you scale out, and if you didn't scale out, where did it go wrong, right? That's equally important. And then lastly, do you want to be high tech or high touch? Well, ideally you want both. So why do you have to choose, right? So making sure self-guided tours are on your website with clear call to actions, making sure your guest cards are integrated with your CRM or PMS, and also too, making sure you're measuring feedback from self-guided tours. A happy prospect is a happy tour. Go through the prospect experience before you go live. Again, making sure that you actually go through the steps and register yourself to make sure it's set up correctly. Developing in-house best practices, having on-site signage too really helps, and making sure that follow-up happens is really key. So what should you expect if you're winning? You should be increasing leasing velocity with self-guided tours. Absolutely. You should 100% have high prospect satisfaction. That feedback should be 5 stars. You should be seeing less time on market, more activity, and absolutely you should be seeing greater on-site efficiency. So I want to thank everyone for attending this call and this virtual trade show. I really hope that we helped you understand what a self-guided tour is and gave you a playbook for success.
Thank you, Andre. That was amazing. Feel free to find Andre in the networking app to chat more. That's it for today's general session. I hope you found it eye-opening. We're going to take a short break, and then at 2:30 Eastern Time, the tracks will begin. Like yesterday, we will have 4 tracks today: Proptech, Finance and Deal Making, Operations Tech, and our Innovation Stage. All tracks have world-class speakers, so you can't go wrong. We'll be back together again at 5 p.m. for the special Hudson Yards tour with Scott Evans. Until then, enjoy.